I am trying to get onto the record some of the mysterious stories that people have told to me over my lifetime about dying, coming back to life, out of body experiences, other spiritual and supernatural experiences of vision, hearing that they had. Why did people tell me these stories? I'm not sure. There must be something in my own character and makeup that people have trusted and wanted to kind of get something off of their chest is the only way I can kind of describe it, because it wasn't like I was necessarily prying or asking for information, but it was kind of like people who didn't even really know me that well. So it was like maybe a safe person outside of their social and family circle, and they just needed to get it off their chest. So you've heard some people called the death doula. I don't really like the word death because I think that's too negative, but I would call it like maybe the mysteries of creation doula or something I would like better. But here's some of the stories I wanted to get out into the world because I think they're very inspiring, and for those of you that struggle with faith or don't really believe you think this is it and it doesn't really matter what you do here, it all does very much matter in my view. And there's if you open your eyes and really open your ears and listen to some stories that are being told around you, you would know yourself. So there are some physical signs. I myself have never seen a spiritual being other than, regular humans. Or if I did see an angel in disguise as a human, I haven't known that. I've heard other people tell of that experience. And one, if you're interested in that, there's a great YouTube channel, Behold Wonder, Behold, Wonder. All, I think one word of the name, but he has had experiences, that man, on seeing angelic beings and demonic beings, and interacting with them. So that's a whole different experience. This is a more like I would say subtle experiences that I have had. So in my case, I've had definitely signs of almost like a ringing or a roaring, like a roar more in my ears, like an ocean kind of sound. I'll have tingles like going up and down really on my neck, and I'll hear like ringing in my ears when I'm thinking of something that I need to do, like I need to call somebody. And so I've learned to trust that, because when I haven't, I have missed opportunities. So one kind of very practical example is there was this one night about 20 years ago where I was standing and washing dishes at the kitchen sink, and my kids were still young. They were still awake, going to bed. My husband, we had finished a family dinner. He was watching like some sports on TV in the other room, and I just had this overwhelming feeling. I was thinking about my dad, and I got that tingling go down my spine, especially the back of my neck and around my ears, and almost like this tingling, roaring kind of sound in my ears. And I'm like, I gotta call my dad. So I called, he picked up, and it was around 9 o'clock at night, and we had this good conversation. He had a outpatient elective surgery about a week before, 7 to 10 days before, and he had wanted to have his gallbladder removed, which was something they could do, with the laser, so it was like a more minor surgery. But like his typical self, he had not taken it easy and was like doing these full intensive set of meetings with the city of Chester outside of Philadelphia in the state of Pennsylvania. And he was really pushing himself and like sitting, and I was concerned about blood clots and that kind of thing. So I was kind of admonishing him, like, you gotta like take a break. He's like, no, this meeting's really important. I had to go to it. There was no other. I'm like, well, then you shouldn't have scheduled, the surgery for that point in time. But, of course he didn't listen, and we had a good conversation, and he was really like positive and happy and chipper. He was talking away. And then we hung up, and we went to bed. And at 6 in the morning, the phone started ringing, and it was still in the time of landlines, so it was like right next to the bed, and it was ringing, through every landline in the house. And I'm like, oh no, this isn't good. And I picked up the phone, and it was my mom, and it was her voice, and she was crying into the phone, and she's like, Erica, the emergency people are here, and they're taking your father to the hospital. I'm like, what? And I'm like, I said, is he conscious? Is he? And I could hear it by then, the flat line of the CPR, heart machine that they had hooked up to him. And she's like, no, he's not. So she had to drive in the car by herself to get, to the hospital. And then she called me when she got back, to the house, because I think she didn't use a cell phone at all at that point because of the radiation aspect. So she was one of the few people still walking around with no cell phone ever. And I got a ticket right away. I was packing, and I got onto a plane and got up to Philly, and was at the house I think by noontime or maybe in the afternoon, and stayed with her. But I'm saying this whole story because it was like God, one of his angels, my guardian angel, I don't know who, but prompted me, God's Holy Spirit in me, you got to call your dad, because it was going to be it was my last chance to hear his voice. So if I hadn't listened, I wouldn't have had that last kind of defining moment with him that was very personal, just between the two of us. So I was so grateful I listened. And I'm going to just pause for a moment for you to maybe think about in your own life those moments where you've heard that inner voice, someone telling you to do something. And did you listen? Did you not listen? Because when it's gentle and soft like that, it's definitely from God. It's not from something deceptive and evil, because it's a good feeling. And the destroyer can't fake goodness. That's not possible. So follow that intuition you might feel it in your stomach sometimes, like a knot in your stomach, like you have to do something. And then regarding my dad, so he was a very public kind of figure in that sense that he was a minister, but he was very involved in community activities and trying to help people and organizations find freedom and autonomy and less suppression, more independence, more love and joy. So he was working on this very difficult project with the city of Chester at the time, where they were trying to protest against, the destruction of the inner city from drugs, and how having all these federal agencies there were not helping. The FBI, the CIA, the police forces were all named. I have all my father's notes from that last week of his life. So there was definitely this conflict going on, and there was also a conflict because the powers that be wanted to build the current soccer stadium for the Professional American Soccer League right down there in their neighborhood. And so they were doing the typical thing, like, we'll promise all the jobs, and this will be so much better for the community. And the community's like, nothing's been helping the community, so everything that anyone's ever promised has only hurt us. And if you drove through there on like a YouTube video, it's terrible. Like it looks like Beirut, Gaza Strip kind of thing. So the buildings might be standing, but there's no living activity going on there. So very sad. Makes me wonder, what was happening. There's definitely like a level of suspicion about, my dad was super healthy athlete his whole life. It seems very strange that was all going down, and he ends up suddenly dying of a heart attack, even though he didn't have any heart disease. And it was like right after this surgery, so I guess there's a possibility he could have had blood clots from sitting too much after the gallbladder surgery. But that, be that as it may, one of the things that happened after Pop died is we were planning a big funeral for him because of how many, we knew it was going to be large from how many people he had touched and, would want to come and be a part of the celebration of his life and what he had done to help others for his whole life. So we ended up having to ask a local church if that was like a super church, that was like more of a big kind of stadium movie theater feeling, if we could go in there. And we had it there. So a lot of people were coming down to help. And a couple other things happened. My sister, we were driving around, which was some of our favorite memories with our Pop. She could feel him in the car. And she's like, I know he would be so happy to be here. And at that point, I could not feel him at that moment, but she could. But there was another time shortly thereafter where I was driving in the car after I was back home, and I felt someone from the back seat touching my elbow. And I knew I was by myself, but it totally felt real. And I swung around, there's no one there. But I think it was either my dad or it was my stepson, who had also passed away a few months before from suicide from drug addiction and alcohol addiction. So I'm not sure which one was with me in the car, but one of them was definitely there. I was listening to a song that I think was more related to my stepson, if I remember correctly, so it might have been him. But then the last thing, of coming back to Pop and his passing, there was another spiritual thing that happened. So again, I said I've never seen a spiritual being. I haven't seen a soul that's leaving the body like others have that I know. But one of my aunts was there at the funeral, and she did see Pop's like spiritual. He was still in his human form, but he was like a translucent kind of hologram of himself. And she woke up. She was staying at one of the church families as a guest for the funeral, and she walked down the hallway to go use the restroom early in the morning, and there was a chair and a set of books at the end of the hallway. And there was my dad, and he was sitting in the chair reading a book. And she could see him, and he couldn't really see her interact, or he did not interact with her. But she saw him, and then he was kind of gone after a little bit. And that was not her blood. She was married to my dad's brother. So he had, I think, come to see them. And you hear these things about like the last 3 days after someone's died. There's often that whole concept of the viewing is sometimes there's stories of people coming back to their bodies and it's not really time for them to go yet before they were embalming them right away. So I think he was still, there's some piece of his soul that was still, because time's not a real thing. Time's a construct. It's not the same over in the other heavenly realm. So they can kind of take their time saying goodbye is how I think about it. Okay, so that's one set of stories. There's more to come. Namaste, everyone. Gotta go to yoga. Bye.